Hey there, welcome to video number 3. We are working through our registration list. Right now we have our data that's saved to an Excel document versus a CSV. We have our columns and rows sized to the right appropriate size for the information that's in each of those cells, and we have a header on our worksheet. From here, we're going to start to manipulate some data. So let me share my screen, and we're going to jump back into the sample dietary workbook here. You can see it's right where we left off from the last video. If yours doesn't look like this, feel free to scroll back and watch exactly what I did to get here, and continue to follow along. So next step in this process. In this data set, just for an example, I have first and last name already broken up, but I also have this badge name column. And sometimes, depending on who's managing your registration platform, you may only get that badge name in the data that you're working from. There's a tool within Excel that would allow us to sort our badge name into first and last name with a click of a button. Now keep in mind, my data set is pretty straightforward. I have a first and last name for everyone. I don't have hyphenated last names in here. I don't have middle initials in here. So with a true data set, you're probably going to have some variance in how many names apply to a first and last name. But to go through these steps, there's only going to be one additional step needed when you're breaking out that information. So first things to do to start this process is we want to add a blank column next to the column that we're going to split from. So next, I'm going to right click on the I column here and insert, which is going to give me a blank I column. And if you were to be working with data that had hyphenated last names or 2 first names or 2 last names, I would recommend adding in a few extra blank columns. And I'll tell you why in just a second. So make sure you have the blank columns next to it. And then we're going to select the column that we actually want to split. Now keep in mind the last video, I added a merged cell in here. So instead of selecting just the H column here, which would include that merged cell, I'm going to scroll down here and select all of the names in the H column down to 500. And then I'm going to go up to our data, and I'm going to click on text to columns. Now, if you're working from a Windows computer, you're still going to be looking for this data. Your screen will look slightly different from mine, but the functionality for Excel, especially with Office 365, is universal. So we're going to go to that data ribbon, and we're going to look for that text to columns. Since we have our selection highlighted, it's just going to work on those cells that we have highlighted. And as soon as I click on this button, it starts this wizard. So this is the text wizard. And what I'm going to tell the system is that I can either choose a delimited character to separate my text. So say if it was a hyphen or a space or a tab, those are all things that we can break into columns if we've selected that, and you'll see that in the next steps. Or I can say after every 10 characters, I want to split the column. More than likely, for our purpose, we're going to use the delimited option. And then exactly what I was just talking about here, our next choice is tab, semicolon, comma, space, or other character. And we, since we're working with first and last name, want to use the space option. And we can see in the example below that we are breaking the first and last name directly into those columns that we wanted to see. Treat consecutive delimiters as one. Since we're only using one delimiter in this example, this is non-applicable, but if you wanted multiple delimiters, this is where we have the option to treat those as consecutive. So it'll do one after another. We click next, and it's going to ask us how to format that, which is exactly what we want here. It's a general format, and our destination is going to be in the H column and the I column. So it's going to keep the information we have in the badge name and break it into the other 2. And then when we click on finish, we're just going to see in the background that we now have badge and name, which is our headers. So I'm going to go in here and change this to first. and last. Just going to keep these slightly different than first name, last name, because our next video, we're going to actually consolidate this back down into the J column. But again, if we had multiple last names, it would go H-I-J. And if we have upwards to 5, we would want to add in those blank columns. What's nice about this is that even though we're breaking this into multiple columns, if it were a middle initial or anything like that, we would catch that in a simple scroll. So anything that's in the J column, or if yours is even further into the K column or whatever have you, you'll be able to see that visually as you're scrolling through your data set, and it's a lot easier to make those manual adjustments, but the majority of the work will have already been done for you. So again, that's called text to columns. That lives under the data ribbon over here, and it's the best and most simple way to identify a delimiter within the cell to break that text into 2 separate columns. In the next one, we're going to walk through how to consolidate, so doing the reverse of that using a simple formula. Again, feel free to follow along with the workbook in the description here if you haven't downloaded it already. Watch back on the other videos to get to where we're at right now and continue to follow along. We'll see you in the next one.